You know what separates the powerful from the powerless? It's not the loudest voice in the room. It's knowing exactly what to say when someone's rage is pointed directly at you like a loaded gun. Most people, when confronted with aggression, they either fight back and escalate the chaos, or they fold completely, becoming victims of someone else's temper. But there's a third way, a calculated approach that disarms the aggressor, flips the power dynamic, and leaves them questioning their own behavior without you ever raising your voice. I've spent years understanding human psychology, not from textbooks but from the streets, from negotiations where one wrong word could cost everything. And I've learned this fundamental truth. Aggressive people aren't actually strong. They're reactive. They're slaves to their own emotions. And the moment you understand this, you hold all the cards. Because while they're burning energy trying to intimidate you, you're 3 steps ahead, using language as a surgical instrument to cut through their armor. Today I'm going to show you 6 verbal strategies that don't just defend you, they transform the entire interaction, making the aggressor realize they've made a terrible miscalculation. The first thing you need to understand is that aggression is theater. It's a performance designed to make you react, to make you scared, to make you submit. And the beautiful thing about theater is that once you see through the performance, the actor loses all credibility. So when someone comes at you with raised voices, with threats, with that primal attempt to dominate, your first move isn't to match their energy. That's what amateurs do. Your first move is to lower your voice, slow down your speech, and create what I call a contrast effect. See, when they're screaming and you respond in a calm, measured tone, something psychological happens in their brain. They suddenly become aware of their own behavior. They hear themselves through your calmness. And that self-awareness, that's the crack in their armor. I've used this in boardrooms, in back alleys, in moments where violence seemed inevitable. And every single time the person who stays calm controls the outcome. It's not about being passive. It's about being deliberate. Oh, when you refuse to dance to their rhythm, they start questioning why their usual tactics aren't working. And that confusion is your opening. But here's where most people make their second mistake. They think staying calm is enough. It's not, because an aggressive person will interpret your calmness as either fear or weakness, unless you pair it with something else, something I call strategic validation. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would I validate someone who's attacking me? Because validation doesn't mean agreement. It means acknowledging the emotion without accepting the behavior. When someone's aggressive, there's always something underneath that rage. Maybe they feel disrespected. Maybe they feel threatened. Maybe they're projecting their own failures onto you. And when you say something like, I can see this matters deeply to you, or I understand you're frustrated right now, you're doing something extraordinary. You're separating the person from their behavior. You're telling them, I see you as a human being, not just as this aggressive act. And that recognition, that small moment of being seen, it short-circuits the aggression. Because most aggressive people have spent their entire lives not being truly heard. They've learned that only through volume and intimidation do they get attention. So when you give them attention without requiring the aggression, you've just removed their primary weapon. I've watched grown men, dangerous men, men who've built empires on fear, completely change their posture when someone simply acknowledged what they were really feeling underneath all that noise. Now, the third element is something that requires nerve, and that's asking questions instead of making statements. When someone's attacking you verbally, your instinct is to defend yourself, to explain, to justify. That's exactly what they want. They want you on the defensive, because it confirms their narrative that you've done something wrong. But when you respond with a question, you shift the entire dynamic. What specifically have I done that's upset you? Can you help me understand what outcome you're looking for here? These aren't rhetorical questions. These are genuine inquiries that force the aggressive person to think rather than react. And here's the critical part. Most aggressive people haven't actually thought through their position. They're running on pure emotion, on adrenaline, on that primitive need to establish dominance. So when you ask them to explain, to be specific, to articulate what they actually want, you're asking them to engage their rational brain, and aggression cannot survive in a rational space. I've seen negotiations that were seconds away from turning violent completely transform because someone had the courage to ask a simple question. It's like throwing cold water on a fire. The flames don't just lower, they reveal what's actually underneath, and usually it's something far more manageable than the initial display suggested. The fourth technique is what I call the reflective mirror, and it's devastatingly effective when used correctly. This is where you repeat back to them what they've just said, but you do it in a way that forces them to hear how they sound. So if someone says, you never listen to anyone, you always think you're right, you respond with, so what you're saying is that I never listen, and I always think I'm right. That's how you see this situation. Now notice what just happened there. You didn't argue, you didn't defend. You simply reflected their words back to them with a slight modification that makes them consider the absoluteness of their statement. Most aggressive accusations are filled with words like always, never, everyone, nobody. These are emotional exaggerations, not factual statements. And when you mirror these words back to someone, they're forced to either double down on an obviously unreasonable position, or they begin to moderate their stance. It's a form of intellectual judo, where you use their own momentum against them. I learned this watching my Aunt Polly handle volatile situations in the betting shop. She never argued with angry gamblers who'd lost their money. She'd simply repeat their accusations back to them in a questioning tone, and within seconds, they'd start walking back their own extremism, because hearing it reflected made them realize how unreasonable they sounded. The fifth approach requires you to understand something fundamental about human psychology, and that's the power of the pause. When someone finishes an aggressive statement, your immediate reaction is to respond, to fill the silence, to defend yourself. Don't let the silence sit there. Let it become uncomfortable. Let them hear the echo of their own words in that quiet space. Because here's what happens in those few seconds of silence. The aggressive person begins to wonder if they've gone too far, if they've miscalculated, if maybe their approach isn't working. Silence creates reflection, and reflection is the enemy of blind aggression. I've used this in interrogations, in business dealings, in moments where someone thought they had me cornered. And every time, that pause, that deliberate silence, it shifts the power. Because the person who can be comfortable in silence is the person who's in control of themselves. And if you're in control of yourself, you're already winning. Most people are terrified of silence, in conflict. They think it makes them look weak or unsure. But silence is strength. It's the ultimate display of confidence, because it says, I don't need to rush to defend myself. I don't need to match your energy. I can simply exist here in this moment and allow you to reconsider your approach. And finally, the sixth technique is perhaps the most sophisticated, and it's what I call offering the bridge. After you've stayed calm, after you've validated their emotion, after you've asked questions, mirrored their words, and used strategic silence, you offer them a way out that allows them to save face. This is crucial, because an aggressive person who feels cornered will only escalate further. But if you give them an honorable exit, they'll take it almost every time. It sounds something like this. I can see we both want to resolve this. What if we take a moment, reset this conversation, and approach it differently? Or perhaps I don't think either of us is at our best right now. Why don't we continue this discussion when we've both had time to consider what we really want from this situation? What you're doing here is giving them permission to step back from their aggression without admitting defeat. You're not saying they were wrong. You're not claiming victory. You're simply offering a mutual de-escalation that frames both of you as reasonable people who got caught in a heated moment. And here's the beautiful part. Once they take that bridge, once they accept that off-ramp from their aggression, they will feel a sense of relief, and shortly after that relief, they'll feel something else, regret. They'll realize they overreacted. They'll recognize that you handled the situation with more maturity than they did, and that realization, that's when they become sorry. Not because you demanded an apology, not because you fought back, but because you gave them the space to see their own behavior clearly, and the dignity to step away from it. You see, making an aggressive person sorry isn't about winning an argument or proving them wrong. It's about creating the conditions where they can see themselves through a clearer lens, where their own behavior becomes apparent to them, where they recognize that their aggression didn't achieve what they wanted and actually made them look worse in the process. That's real power. Not the power to destroy someone or humiliate them, but the power to transform a destructive interaction into something that leaves both parties with their dignity intact. And that's a skill that will serve you in every area of your life. Whether you're dealing with a difficult boss, a volatile family member, a confrontational stranger, or anyone else who thinks aggression is the path to getting what they want. Because once you master these techniques, you'll never be at the mercy of someone else's temper again. You'll be the one in control, always.